Hello, and welcome to the Planter Podcast, where we talk about gardening and the weather, and we try to make it easier for you to grow food. I am one of your hosts, Peter, and I wish it was warmer here, and that's why I said all that. And
I'm Mylan. I'm an urban gardener growing here in Atlanta, Georgia, where it's actually nice and warm.
And I'm Erin. I'm a market gardener in Huron County, Ontario, where I always complain about the weather.
yeah, give me both. Well, until the summer, and then we're like, it's nice, and then Mylan's like,
Cooking.
And then we're like, drought. Why are we having drought?
yeah. So, Aaron, what are we talking about today?
Well, today, since it's top of mind this time of year, we're talking about all our tips and tricks, do's and don'ts for shopping for seeds. So, whenever you go online or go to the garden center, there's an absolutely overwhelming amount of selection, and you can't possibly grow it all. So, what do you look for to know what's going to do well in your garden and what's going to match your family's preferences? So, this is just kind of us going through, what do we look for when we're seed shopping. So, I'll kick it off at a high level. So, for me, I'm usually looking for a balance of characteristics. With the market garden, again, there's some different considerations about your customer tastes and preferences. So you're not just thinking about, what do you want to grow? You're thinking about what does your clientele want? So I'm sort of balancing, I'm looking for flavor characteristics for sure, because that's what sort of sets things, any homegrown produce, that's really what sets it apart is the flavor and the nutrition. So that's kind of top of mind. But then I'm also trying to balance things like, is there disease resistance? Is this an early maturing variety that's going to get to market faster than everyone else? Is this a unique variety that's going to be eye catching? So those are kind of top level, some of the characteristics I'm looking for. And I know at a high level the plants I want to grow, but then when it comes down to the varieties, that's where I think things get a little more interesting. So what about you guys? How do you approach your seed shopping?
I just look for the prettiest looking picture and buy that.
Great tip.
Honestly, so I got my seed box here. I do like the pretty pictures where they show, oh, that's so nice. Oh, look at this one. Oh, it's so great. But um, a lot of what I look for is um, something that I want to eat is usually so like if there's something that if you're not gonna eat it, don't bother growing it. And I've learned over the years that there's a few things where like kale is good a little bit, but I'm not a super kale fan, so I don't really buy a lot of those seeds, and I don't really grow a lot of it. I have one or two plants in the garden, and that's good enough. So yeah. Besides that, if there's something really cool and unique that I have not tried before, or if there's a veggie that I really like tomatillos. I've got a whole seed bin just of tomatillos because I love them that much. And there's probably five or six varieties that I've been trying to grow just to see, if there's a better one out there that will make me love it even more. So yeah. How about you, Mylan?
I buy seeds using a method called reckless abandon. So let me see, get it on camera. Which way?
There
All
you
right,
go.
so I have gallon size storage bags where all my seed packets go. This is just lettuce. It's absurd. I buy kind of like what Peter said. Sometimes I buy it just because I like the way it looks. Sometimes I buy it because I've gotten a recommendation. Peter put me on to tomatillos last year. So obviously I couldn't just start with one. I had to get green. I had to get purple. I had to get dwarf, right? So don't be like me. I do not recommend it. I justify it by saying that I'm buying groceries in advance. But it's fun. This is my hobby. I don't do a whole lot of shopping of other stuff outside of gardening. So gardening is my splurge, and seed starting is, it's a passion of mine. So I love getting the different varieties, like you mentioned. You have something like tomatoes and peppers where you're used to have going in a grocery store and seeing like one or two, right?
Yeah.
Maybe four. I go in the seed shop or I go to the website and there are dozens upon dozens, right? And so you fall down that wormhole. I have gotten better at deciding there are certain characteristics that I look for the crops that I want to grow. You don't have to do this. This is purely personal preference. But one decision that I made is I'm only growing determinate tomatoes or dwarf indeterminates from here on out. I don't ever need the sprawling vines in an urban garden. I just don't have room for it, right? So that will be a cutoff for me. I don't like a ton of the ultra hot peppers. I do,
Hmm.
one or two of the ghost peppers for fun, but then the majority of mine are going to be sweet to medium heat because that's what we use the most of. So that kind of goes back to what Peter was saying. Pick those things that you know that you enjoy and grow as much of that as you want. If
Yeah,
you're,
even if it grows well for you, if you're not going to eat it, there's
yep,
really not much point. Unless you're growing it just to give it away to people. There's a bunch of people that like it. Now, not everyone like wants you to dump all their extra zucchini on them. So that might not be a nice thing to do.
yeah, if you're a home gardener, you probably don't want more than one or two squash and zucchini plants. Your
Mhm.
neighbors are going to get tired of you, even with those. So keep that in mind when you're buying your zucchini seeds. That's one of those. I've gotten over hoarding those. I don't need a ton of those because
Mhm.
I just can't grow that many, right? So that's where I'm going to do a shameless plug of our own planter app by planning out my garden and seeing what I actually have room to plant out. That kind of curbs my shopping spree because otherwise I'll just buy seed collection after seed collection and have no room to grow it.
Mhm.
You mentioned the app, so I did roll out a new feature or an improvement to the feature. So in the seed box, now you can actually scroll through and see it organized by plant. So like I can go all the way down to tomatoes and see that I have way too many different types. See, like, oh, even just cucumbers there. I've got one, two, three, four, five, six, seven types of cucumbers. And this is just showing the ones that I have seeds for. If they run out, then it hides it automatically. So I've got, yeah, even more just like empty seed packets in my collection. So um yeah, so if you're having trouble keeping track of all your seeds, definitely check out the app and the seed box feature. Um, it is free to use, so anyone can use it, even if you're premium or not. So definitely check it out.
So
Um,
let's stick on the that screen that you had up
oh
just
yeah, let
for
me
a
get that
moment.
back up. There we go.
So one of the things I want to highlight is the date. So you've got the ability to save the date that your seeds were purchased. So
Hmm.
I'm going to mention a don't here. If you've
Mhm.
already got seeds, a bunch of seeds that are within the 3 year window, you don't buy any more of those seeds, even if it's a different variety that you want to try. If you're growing in an urban area, you've got limited space. It doesn't help to have 15 packs of seeds of tomatoes that you bought in 2025 because you're not going to get around to growing those. Um,
With the exception of a few that don't germinate well after like 2 years,
yeah,
like
and then at that
onion
point,
seeds are one of those, and yeah,
Mhm.
at that point you may want to experiment with chaos sowing, but you're better off just go ahead and throwing those out.
yeah.
Yeah. And I was going to bring that up. Like sometimes it can be tempting to buy in bulk if you're getting a better price. But for a lot of seeds, wherever possible, it's better if you can use them fresh, either same year, next year. It's not to say that, you know, if they're 2, 3, 4 years old, they're going to completely stop germinating. But, you know, every seed will lose that little bit of viability year over year. And some of them, like Peter mentioned, like onions and parsnips are notorious. They really don't keep very long. So that's one of those things where if you go in with a plan, like Mylan said, so starting with a plan is key, you know, to try to keep this in check, but wherever possible, try to match up, you know, just the minimum quantity that you need for this season. Don't try to buy, you know, 2, 3, 4 years worth, because the other thing is things change, your plans change. You decide you like one variety more than another. So it doesn't really make sense unless it's something you know for sure you use a ton of every single year. Then okay, buy it in bulk. But otherwise, just, you know, stick to the bare minimum for your plan, and that'll make sure that you get the best possible germination. So one of the other things that I wanted to talk about was recommendations from other from other gardeners. So this can be a little bit of a trap sometimes. Like you see people on social media, you know, they're plugging their favorite varieties of tomatoes and peppers, and you're like, oh my gosh, I have to have that. I have to try that. But it may or may not work in your climate, in your growing zone. They might have a great experience with it. You might have a pest in your location that devours it, or your season might be too cold, or whatever the case may be. So I think it's a bit of a double-edged sword. Like I really love to talk to other gardeners about what they're growing and just see what's out there, you know, see what people are having success with. But then you need to kind of bring it back to your own context and say, does this actually work, you know, in my short growing season? Does this actually work with the summer heat that I get? Does this work with the size of my garden? Right. So keep those things in mind.
Yeah. Now, another thing that I was thinking about is a lot of seeds will be pest resistant or disease resistant. And I just want to hear your thoughts on that because I don't know if they're really truly pest or disease resistant when they say that they are. I kind of take it with a grain of salt when I see that. But I just want to hear what you guys think. Do you think it's an actual thing?
Yeah, I think it's helpful. I think I've heard more on the disease resistant side. You might get, you know, but there's a lot of times, like especially with more commercial seed companies, you'll see, you know, disease resistance packages, right? And so they've done a lot of selective breeding to try to, you know, reduce the impact of disease. It's important to note that it's not that that plant is going to be impervious to that disease. It will still probably catch you at some point, but it just, you know, kind of delays the impact and or reduces the impact on the plant. So that can be helpful. So I do think it's helpful, and it's worth trying. Like if there has been a particular disease that you've had issues with through the years, you know, obviously a starting point is your cultural practices in the garden, right? And, you know, do you have good airflow? Do you have, you know, your soil balanced correctly? You know, is the plant moisture stressed or not, right? So managing those things is kind of your number one. But on top of that, choosing resistant varieties can also be another tool in the toolbox, I think.
Yeah. So it's not like a one. It's not going to be this be all end all solution to your problems, but it might help a little bit.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there are some seeds that I pick. So like if I go to the wide shot here, I've got a little planter with a grow light up there, and I've got some little like indoor varieties of tomatoes and cucumbers. And so sometimes you can find um, varieties that don't require pollination by bees and insects. So that's another thing to look for if you're having trouble with that, or if you're having trouble with pests and you want to cover them up, you might look for something like that that doesn't require insects to come in. Because if you keep all the insects out, and you don't have a special variety, then nothing's going to get pollinated, and then you won't get any fruit. So, something to keep in mind.
And then in terms of seed companies, so that's another kind of big choice point. It's like who do you buy seeds from? There's so many variables. So obviously one is the cost, right? Some are cheaper, some are more expensive. Um, but you do sort of need to think about the quality of the seed as well. There are sort of different tiers and different levels of quality. So sometimes you might pay a little bit of a premium, but you might end up with a better quality seed that's more vigorous, has better germination rates. So what I tend to look for in a seed company, I do like to buy as local as possible. I mean, I don't, I'm not sticking within a specific, 50-mile radius or something like that, but wherever possible, I think it's good to support seed companies that are in your general area. They'll probably have varieties that are, well adapted to your climate. They'll be able to offer you good advice for your specific context and growing something.
On
um
the flip side of that, if you just go to your big box store like Lowe's or Home Depot, you need to be very careful because they will sell pretty much the same thing in every single store across all of North America. So, yeah, just watch out because like a lot of the things that they sell there, I get excited when I see it and I'm like, oh wait, no, this I can't possibly grow this. Or it, you know, they'll they'll bring out their big, display of seeds, and it'll be way past the time when you should have started those seeds. Like onions is a great example of that. They'll bring them out probably around April is probably when they take out their big seed shelf, and by then it's at least here in Connecticut, it's too late to start onions. So
yeah,
I
you
don't know
bring up
who's buying them, but they
you bring
it's
up a really
unfortunate.
good point, Peter. Like, you would expect that if you're going to one of these stores that they're selling it at the time where it's appropriate to grow it, and that it's going to work for your area, and that's not always the case. So again, talking to local gardeners, if you get involved with your local garden club, or if you have friends that garden, that's a huge way to find out not only what's going to work in your area, but also seed companies. Because sometimes, you kind of hear these rumors too about certain companies, and like, oh, this company, not so great, customer service a little sketchy. And oh, this company is amazing and their germination is awesome and they've got great resources. So it really does pay to do a little bit of research and not just buy, necessarily the first thing that pops up. And certainly compare different companies too, right? Like, just, one year buy from one year buy from another, see if there was any differences. And don't be afraid to do a germination test too. Like, if you're wondering about the quality of your seeds, you can just put them in a damp paper towel, not soaking wet, just a damp paper towel, put it in a plastic baggie. Try to keep it roughly at the optimal germination temperature range, and see what percentage germination you get. So if you do that with the seeds that you order, then you'll kind of know right off the bat what sort of germination rates to expect. So basically, don't just assume that every seed is the same quality, and don't just assume that every company is the same quality. It does pay to try different things, shop around, and sort of keep tabs on that.
To that point, as you're looking for seed companies, look for ones that actually do publish the germination rate for those seeds.
Mhm.
The higher end companies will post that on the website and on the physical seed packets that you get, right? So that's something to keep an eye out for. Most of them stand by, a reputable company stands by that germination rate. So if you've got a lot of seeds, you don't get good germination, you can go to that company and, let them know, hey, I've got this order of seeds. The published germination rate was 90%. I'm seeing 40%. And many of the reputable companies will stand by those rates and make things right with you. So that's something to keep an eye on and look for as well.
For sure.
I just want to show this is in the seed box. If you click the filter icon, you can see all the sources that you've bought your seeds from. So I've got a ton of them here, and one of them I want to highlight is the library. You might want to check your local library because mine actually has like a little spot where you can go through all these seed packets, and you don't even have to buy them. You can try out a whole bunch of different new varieties, and it's free. And then if you have extra seeds, you can contribute to your library's, collection, and it's just a great way to try out new seeds. I don't know if if every library has this, I doubt it, but it's worth a shot, And then if your library doesn't have something, maybe you could start it yourself. So
Mhm.
talk to librarians. I'm sure they're always looking for new new ways to get people in, and yeah, that's one of them. So yeah.
For sure. And there's lots of like seedy Saturday events or seed
Hmm.
swaps. So definitely check around in your local community. I mean, again, those seeds, they tend to be grown by other gardeners who are saving seeds. So I wouldn't go in that with, we were just talking about the germination rates and the expectation and the customer service. So those I would say, I've certainly had very good experience with, picking up seeds from seed swaps or even other gardeners just saying, hey, I have too many seeds, have at it.
Yeah.
But if you're really expecting a certain germination rate, that could be a little bit tricky. But if you just want to try a new variety, see how it does, do a bit of experimentation, it's a great, awesome, cost effective way to get seeds.
Yeah. And we have had a few questions, come in through customer service, be like, is Burpee the official seed company of Planter? And the answer is no. We don't have any official seed company. That's just like the varieties that we put in the app, and I am working on getting more so that we have a bigger variety. So that is coming down the line. If you're a user of Planter and you're wondering why is it just Burpee, it's just because they're one of the biggest companies. So that's what we initially started with, but there's no business relation there. So
For sure.
yeah.
And while we're kind of on the talk of comparing companies, another thing that I thought of is even if you're not going to order from a different company, sometimes it can behoove you to read the descriptions from different companies for the same variety because they'll post different
Hmm.
information that sometimes is important. So a couple examples of that. So I picked up an eggplant variety, heirloom, super excited, thought it was going to be great. Read the description of it. It's like, oh, this is amazing. Later on, after I already purchased it, I don't remember why, but I happened to be on another seed company website, and it says, oh, doesn't do well in cool climates, like does best in places with really hot summers. And it's like, oh, well, that's not me.
Yeah.
I mean, eggplant in general is, it prefers a hotter climate, but this one was specifically noted as like, yeah, if you're in a cooler place with a shorter season, this one might be dicey. And it's like,
I
oh,
have I've noticed that some companies will just really try to upsell. They'll be like, "This is the perfect seed. It's the best carrot you'll ever buy," and then they'll say that for every single variety that they got. It's the best tasting. They
sweetest.
can't all be the best. So yeah.
And another example of that from this year, and this, so I was originally really excited to try this red stem celery. So I thought this looks beautiful. It's going to be super eye catching, really, really cool. It's an heirloom variety. This is great. And I think the first inkling I got, well, Peter, we were talking probably on this podcast and just, in general about how celery is quite a hard
Hmm.
crop to grow. But I think you had experience with this red stem celery in particular. And I was like,
Yeah.
doesn't sound super positive. Talk to another fellow gardener. Again, not specifically the red stem celery, but anyways, I ended up on a different seed company website looking at this red stem celery, and they said in their description, not good for fresh eating. Best only used for cooking in stews because it has a very strong flavor. It's not like the,
Oh,
kind of
okay.
watery, crispy celery you would expect from a grocery store. So I was like, ooh, that's not what a lot of people want in a celery. Like, if
Yeah.
I was growing it for me personally, sure, maybe I'd try it. Maybe it's the best tasting celery ever if you cook it. But it's not a great thing to have to go to customers, for example, and say, oh, the celery looks nice, but don't try to eat it as a celery stick. So, again, that's where it kind of pays to combine this like word of mouth experience plus, doing a little bit of digging with different seed companies to really, hone in on things that are going to work for you and what you want and what you're going for.
Yeah. Mine, the stuff that I just while we're on the celery train here, the stuff I grew was it tasted okay. It was just very chewy and not in a good way. You
Mhm.
know, it didn't have that nice crisp crunch that I was expecting.
Mhm.
So that could have been grower error too. So I just
Mhm.
want to disclaimer there. It could be fine. So
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a combination of things. Like, I think the variety itself is not set up to be that typical crispy, crunchy variety. And then on top of
mhm.
that, just the fact that it's a very challenging crop to grow. And when you put those two aspects together, it's like, maybe this isn't the best variety to try, at least not right now.
Yeah, yeah.
Speaking of varieties, there's one thing that I kind of learned as I've started to progress more into my gardening journey with seed companies. The company that you sell for isn't, I'm sorry, the company that you buy your seeds from is not always the developer of that seed.
Yes.
So sometimes you kind of want to double check with the company to, especially if you're looking for something local, ask them, is this a seed that they have harvested and developed internally, or if they are getting this from a wholesaler?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not to say that getting them from a wholesaler is bad. It's just you want to go in with as much information as possible if you're looking for, like I said, something that is targeted for your specific environment.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean you can't try something from Aaron's environment in Canada if you're growing in Atlanta like I am, but you just want to kind of know what to expect, or to have a ballpark idea of what the best environment is for that crop.
100%. That's a really good point, Mylan. A lot of times I think we assume that each of these seed companies is growing and producing, or at least collaborating one-on-one with seed farmers, and that's not there. A lot of them actually just buy from really big international conglomerates. So um, again, some companies are very explicit in saying, this is the seed farmer that we collaborated with and it's all organic and here's exactly where it was grown. And then others, it's a little bit more of a toss up as to where exactly it came from.
Yep, yep, for sure. Um, Anything else before we end this?
I will throw one more tip when
Mhm.
you're looking for companies. See if they are actually running trials of those seeds, right? So if it's not one that they've developed themselves, some seed companies will do a trial or a season or two ahead of when they actually start to sell those seeds. And then that'll give you a better idea of, is this crop the one that I'm looking for? And does it have a history of performing good or bad in my area? So check with your seed companies to see if they've done that testing.
Yeah, that could have avoided the whole of Peppergate from what was it, like 2 or 3 years ago?
Yep, and that was one of those that kind of tipped us off that companies were buying seeds from one bigger supplier because we were all getting just, they weren't the peppers that they were supposed to be. And talking to people across social media, this was happening coast to coast,
Mm-hmm.
with a bunch of different peppers.
Yep. Yep. I got caught in that. I think I had a rainbow blend, and I believe it was the Black Beauty, something like that. It was a purple pepper, and it ended up being like a cherry pepper. And I've heard of people getting jalapenos as well instead of certain pepper. Like, yeah, it was very widespread.
Yep, I was looking for shishitos and I ended up with jalapenos, which I had
Ooh.
already planted other jalapenos, so
Mhm.
I just was on jalapeno overload that year.
Yeah, it's disappointing with such a long, like it takes so long to harvest a pepper. By the time you can't put another one in its place in the garden. It's good, it's done.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. I think the only other, I mean, we haven't really gone into, open pollinated heirloom hybrid. I think maybe we can talk about that in a different episode, but, certainly there are some differences there. So if
Hmm.
you're curious, that could be something to read up on. And again, we can certainly bring that up in a future episode. Let us know, like, give us feedback if that's something, you'd like us to talk more about. The only other thing I don't think we've touched on really explicitly is the days to maturity.
Oh,
So there's a couple
yeah.
things to think about there. So one is just in terms of the overall length of your growing season. So you can check that in Planter. You can check that in settings. You can see how many days are in your growing season, how many days are left in your growing season. So you do want to be careful when you're growing, especially long growing crops, just to make sure that you have enough time within your growing season. A lot of times, if it's right on the edge, that's when you're looking at starting seeds indoors. But in areas with shorter seasons, generally, if you look for early maturing varieties, that'll help you get more yield out of your short season, right? Because it'll come to maturity faster. And especially with fruiting plants that keep giving and giving and giving, like tomatoes, if you can get it to maturity faster, that gives you, that many more days before your first frost date that you can actually keep harvesting. So just keep that in mind in terms of the overall length of your growing season, and not only do I have enough time to grow this crop, but also if I have a short growing season, maybe I look for something that matures a little bit earlier, just to, try to maximize the harvest.
I think that applies to not just to shorter growing seasons, but if you're growing in an urban environment like mine, where I need that space, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to be able to squeeze in some succession sowing or plantings later on in the season. So that's another reason why I would go with an early variety, is because I can use that space twice, potentially in a season, as opposed to one plant staying there the entire time, even with a long growing season.
For sure. That's a good point.
Also, a lot of the days maturity that you might see on a seed packet, it might not actually be from when you plant the seed in the ground to when you can harvest. It might be different seed companies do it differently. So some seed companies will say it's actually from when it sprouts to when you harvest, or it might even be from when it's big enough to transplant to. So who was it? Johnny's, right, has a really good guide on that. They're pretty good about telling you exactly what that number is. So
Johnny's, I've seen it on Johnny's. I've seen it on West Coast Seeds. So they're very explicit. They say days to maturity from sprouting, or days to maturity from planting, or days to maturity from transplanting. When that's not clearly specified, usually the unwritten rule is it's however that crop is most commonly planted. So if it's most commonly a transplanted crop, the days to maturity is from transplant. If it's most commonly a direct seeded crop, the days to maturity is from direct seeding. But again, there's a lot of crops that you can do either or, almost interchangeably. So that's where it kind of gets a little murky. Plus, there's this whole element of, how early are you starting indoors to transplant, right? So it can be a bit confusing, but a really, good companies will provide that information to you and say, hey, when we're quoting you 80 days to maturity, it's from the day you transplanted. It's not from the day that you're seeding it.
And we try to make it easier for you in the app. We do it from sprout to harvest. So it's when that seed germinates. And then when we're planning it in the tasks view, we actually take that sprout date that you might want, and then we take into account the germination too. So if it's going to be 2 weeks of germination, we'll say, okay, this is the date you should start your seeds. So they germinate 2 weeks later, and then you get the harvest, whatever it is, plus another 100 days or so, So we try to do the math for you so that you don't have to. But, like anything in the garden, it's all kind of a guessing game. So your mileage may vary. It depends on how much sun you're getting. Depends on the temperature. Depends on how you start your seeds. Depends on, I don't know if you're lucky or not, I guess. So.
Well, that's the other kind of unwritten rule, is basically the days to maturity is kind of in peak season or under optimal growing conditions. So how many of us really have, fully optimal growing conditions, all the time, right? So just bear that in mind when you're looking at, what you're planting. Just keep those days to maturity top of mind.
It's their best estimate.
Right.
Optimistic best estimate. That was supposed to fade in there. Let me try again. Well, anyway, I think that's the end of this podcast episode. Thank you for joining us. Oh, and it just faded out again. There it goes. Okay. Thank you for joining us. Please make sure to like, subscribe, share this if you are on the YouTube. If you are watching in or listening on a podcatcher, please give us a good rating and share this episode with your friend. And until next time, bye.